Grace, I am so sorry. Sorry, there's a dog with me. Especially when I opened up your paper and I was like, it's about healthcare bias. I'm dying to. It's a great topic. And I will just try and give you extra helpful feedback in an effort to try and make up for the fact that I dropped the ball. Okay. The topic that I chose to look into is the effect of personal biases among healthcare workers and overall how it affects the level of care given to patients. Given that, I'm planning on going into healthcare in the future, I felt as though it was important for me to be able to learn about something that may be present in everyday life. When I first started looking into some articles regarding this topic, I was shocked to find out just how prevalent an issue this is. That's my understanding, that it is a big deal, but I'm here to learn more. In general, I believe no one should be denied the right to healthcare or medical treatment. Something as vital as healthcare should be easily accessible to everyone. I mean, we're talking sometimes about life and death here. Cool. So this is the direction we're going. You're almost getting to healthcare should be a human right. I don't know if you want to get there or not, but it kind of sounds like maybe that's the point you're getting to, which is kind of a big line that some people have moved that debate that direction. In the first article I read, it discussed implicit bias and how it overall affects patient care and relationships between doctors and their patients. Implicit bias is defined as the unconscious, usually negative assumptions humans make about others they perceive as being in some way different from themselves. For example, it is stated the majority of physicians are white and male. Still male, huh? Honestly, I'm kind of surprised. I thought well, I guess these things take time to shift over, but it's my impression that there are more women in med schools now, so maybe eventually there'll be more women anyway. And the unconscious assumption they may hold about people who aren't white or male can lead to inappropriate treatment decisions. The article goes on to elaborate on a study published in 2016 in the Journal of Clinical Oncology. In this study, they examined the interactions between black patients and white oncologists. So I'm really bummed out that somehow your papers fell through the cracks. But on the plus side, I'm feeling just a tiny bit better because you're doing a really nice job here. So I'm not feeling like, what do I want to say? Like, I'm not feeling like you were twisting in the wind. You have some solid writing skills here. So, okay. At the beginning of the study, the oncologist had been administered a test for levels of implicit bias. Overall, the study found that oncologists who rated higher in implicit racial bias had shorter interactions with their patients. So I'm really interested, maybe I'll talk about this later. I'm really interested in how they evaluated implicit racial bias. I had the class do those, things where you like good, bad, and just try to go with your instincts. But I'm sure there are many other ways that people have measured that. So, and that would be an awesome thing for you to present on. I think this would be so helpful for your classmates to hear about. Anyway, those patients had, they had shorter interactions. These patients also had rated their interactions as less patient-centered and supportive. The study and article also helps to reinforce the impact of implicit bias on healthcare, especially by providing real-life situations. Well, now I'm dying to know one of the real-life situations. I think that would be great there. A similar article I read discussed implicit bias and racial disparities found in healthcare. It goes on to describe a study done in the United States with 400 different hospitals where it showed that, quote, black patients with heart disease received older, cheaper, and more conservative treatments than their white counterparts. And black patients were also found to be discharged sooner after surgery than white patients. I feel like I've heard some of this before, and oh my God, it's so important to bring up and to discuss. The article characterizes these issues as structural, deeply rooted in the healthcare system we currently have. Deeply rooted. There is a two-tiered healthcare system that provides wonderful care to those with private insurance and mediocre care to those without. And disparities like this, more often than not, disproportionately affect people of color. The issue has become a vicious cycle ingrained in our society so deeply that we can't seem to find a way to escape it. Because your writing is is pretty solid here. Like, you do a lovely job of making your quotes flow in, and explaining your quotes and all that stuff. So I will comment here again more on talked about the two-tiered healthcare system. Wonderful care to those with private insurance and mediocre care to those without. Maybe I shouldn't even talk about this, but or maybe you'll get into this later. Like, that makes me curious about how do people get, like, people who do these jobs, how do they move into one side of that or another, right? How do they end up in a place where they primarily get paid with private insurance, or a place where they serve people who don't have insurance? I guess I'm just thinking about that because I've been on occasion to a very fancy doctor, or everything was very expensive, and I've also been to a free clinic, and honestly, I had way better care at the clinic when I was going there in my grad student poverty. So anyway, another issue related to this topic is healthcare workers' ability to deny patients care. One tiny thing there, related to healthcare workers' ability, because their ability belongs to them. You need an apostrophe after the S on workers, because it's more than one of them and belongs to them, yeah. English having the apostrophe S's are possessive is the thing I feel like I apologize for the most as an English teacher. I'm like, I know, it doesn't make any sense. It's a bad idea, but okay. The conscience rule would allow healthcare workers to refuse to treat patients based on their own religious beliefs. I read an article that dismissed this rule, and when doctors have the right to refuse patients... I read an article that discussed this rule, and when doctors have the right to when doctors have the right to refuse patients treatment. I still think that could be, you could probably make that a little better. The article stated that the conscience rule, quote, would enable discrimination by allowing providers to deny healthcare to certain patients, particularly women and LGBTQ plus individuals. Yeah, it's strange how none of the things that white men want doctors to do are ever controversial. How weird. Okay. Again, lovely. Leading your reader into your quote, and would overall widen the issue of discrimination in the healthcare field. After reading these articles, I believe that I have a stronger understanding of the effects personal biases have in the healthcare system. I've also learned about ways in which it is important to address and realize one's own personal biases. Many people have a difficult time accepting the fact that they may have personal biases. I mean, of course, people are going to believe that they treat everyone equally. Right, and like, I mean, that's a positive thing. I'd like for people to think that they aren't, like, it wasn't always the case that, and for some people it's still not the case, that not being racist or not being sexist was a positive thing. But there is, back to your paper, there is quite a large stigma towards acknowledging racial bias. It's something that people usually find uncomfortable to talk about. You definitely don't need quotation marks around uncomfortable. I feel like the reasons that you might use quotation marks there, if you were using some like really slang word, some really informal word to describe it, like if you said it's something that people usually find makes them feel, quote, some type of way. Which I still remember the first time somebody said that to me, and I was like, what type of way do you feel? Yeah, okay. So the reasons that we use quotation marks, of course, you're doing a lovely job of showing that things come from another source, those kind of quotation marks. People talking out loud in stories, right? People talking out loud in fiction or nonfiction. And then there's the weird case where we do it, like I said, because you're saying, okay, this is slang and I'm not like really using this in my sentence, but I'm just kind of talking about this expression. Or if you were, or if you were wanting to talk about the word uncomfortable itself. So for hundreds of years, uncomfortable has described how people feel when their feet are cold or something like that. Okay. However, the most important thing is being able to acknowledge your own biases. For healthcare workers, all you need to do is to be able to say, I know that I have this bias, so I just need to keep in mind when I'm working with patients and providing care. There's no set solution to this problem, so all we can do is work toward minimizing the impacts of it. Well, damn. I love this paper. I love it. I wish I had gotten to it on time, but okay. Absolutely, yes. Super important. And then, I don't know, maybe you'll talk about this in future papers, but this issue of making it okay to talk about your own biases, like, and also because I'll just go in a little bit more and you can stop it and not listen to any of this, but to me, that's like a huge step. Like, I grew up in an all-white neighborhood, went to an all-white school, and then I ended up teaching at a school where well, I mean, all my students were black except for Vincent, as I say. You know, and I was there for 8 years, so something like 700, hundreds of students I taught. And the only students I had ever taught were students of color until, I guess until I was teaching at KU. So that gave me many opportunities. I say opportunities to like think about racism and think about bias and all that stuff. And I learned so much from my students. I learned so much from their parents, and I learned so much from my fellow teachers who had worked with within the Black community for a long time. And I learned so much from my fellow teachers who were Black and who could, tell me stuff and tell me to sit down and shut up at times when that's what I needed to hear. But they didn't really tell me to sit down and shut up. But they were able, I think, to like course correct me. And really what I took away from that was that I don't like to call people racist, but I like to call ideas and actions racist. Because to me, racism is something like it infects everything. It's like we're the fish and we're swimming in a fishbowl of racism. So it is a manner, I really liked the way that you put it then. It's a matter of being able to acknowledge your own biases and for people to be okay with you doing that, right? It's a very delicate thing. Like for you to create a space where I was teaching a class over the summer, helping lead a class over the summer about talking about race, and it's a really delicate thing, right? To let people feel safe enough to be like, okay, every time I see, a Black guy walks by my car, and I always lock the doors. A white guy walks by and I don't, or whatever it is. But when you let people admit that stuff, then they can think about it and they can potentially like forgive themselves and be like, hey, nobody's perfect. So yeah, all that is to say that I really enjoyed your paper. One last thing, I'm looking at the citations. So, excuse me. So, there's very strange indentations when you do works cited. So like the second line has to go in. In a normal paragraph, the first line would go in. That's one way of doing paragraphs, right? The first line goes in and then we go on from there. And that can be really awkward to do when you have the long website name. But you should be able to do it like in a third one there. Like refuse to treat should be moved over, and then that long website name should be moved over. Okay, like one last thing. Those need to be in alphabetical order. So let's put bridges first, and then do I know the alphabet? How, and then Hull. So, okay, that's really it.